nanotechnology assuming the persona of whatever that particular innovation is going to be, rather than some sort of encompassing epistemological or institutional attitude about the whole field. One of the big components of taking a look at this narrative aspect is a rather expansive movement from what we usually hear framed as discussions of trust in risk analysis to the broader notion of ethos. And here, we're going all the way back into classical rhetorical theory, but I don't want to go quite that far back, because the starting point for what we're talking about in terms of what we kind of know data-wise, of course, the familiar source credibility studies, and those studies that go back into the 50s and the 60s, talk about credibility operating on two levels, major independent variables relating to source credibility, our competence and trustworthiness. But in the narrative sense, we're talking about credibility operating on two levels, which are almost always conflated. And that is the level of trust and credibility of who's telling the story, and the credibility of the actors within the story itself. So it's kind of this two levels that we have to take a look at, people are being exposed to, and we'll see how that operates in the case study momentarily. More about that soon. But in terms of ethos, first of all, this whole idea that I think it really reminds us that we are not dealing with a technocratically based model of understanding risk. If we remember that trust is a receiver-based construct, right? And we are talking about trust, of course, as we heard yesterday, in terms of individual and collective trust, or institutional, or expert versus epistemic, okay? Fair enough. But I think there are other dimensions, and in fact, communication research has been uncovering these dimensions for a while, and it's kind of interesting because you almost never hear these explicitly and systematically discussed in the context that we've been discussing over the past couple of days. First of all, there is the very old notion that Aristotle called goodwill, which it turns out in research by folks such as Tevin and McCroskey parses out as caring. Now, on a theoretical level, you find renewed interest in this in a lot of feminist theory. The feminist theory that says, look, if you are talking about some normative ideas of credible sources, and in fact, even in the larger sense of preferred structures of democratic engagement, this is something you have to take into account that goes beyond merely having a consistent track record in terms of trustworthiness and reliability, and it also goes beyond technical qualifications. But there are some indications, particularly in the communication literature, that we are talking about what seems to emerge as an independent variable there. Then we have other factors that play some role, probably as intensifiers in one fashion or another of these independent variables, or perhaps mediators of the independent variables, and that is immediacy. There is a large body of research on the whole idea in context of instruction, scholarship of teaching and learning, that talks about the influence of immediacy in creating feelings of affinity. Now, in terms of risk analysis, what we're talking about, and we're going to see this operating momentarily, I'm giving you a lot of promissory notes on what's going to appear in these case studies, but if I don't fulfill them, then call me on it in Q&A, and I'll be happy to return to them. But what we're talking about with immediacy, if we're talking particularly about the kind of top-down technocratic revelations of risk, shall we say, essentially those will work in the area of immediacy if the audiences somehow feel a personal connection with the people who are communicating those risks to them, which is probably another reason why we want to really pay some careful attention to the communication flow as Pat was kind of alluding to, the communication flow about how decision-making matrices are operating once people get out of a somewhat more formal decision-making environment. What are the lines of communication, the lines of influence there? And to the extent that they're interpersonal, they're probably driven by this feeling of connectedness that, again, isn't captured very easily in a lot of the existing risk analysis literature. Furthermore, there are these moral concerns, and again, some people have alluded to these. I'm adding one here that we really haven't heard much about, and that is the whole notion of accountability. This may explain a lot of public distrust with corporate communication about risk, because the idea may well be, particularly if the organization has a track record of environmental problems, that, oh, well, essentially what we have is attempts at damage control or attempts at image management, and not a genuine attempt to take responsibility for the implications, for example, the environmental implications of the products and the activities that this particular organization is engaging in. Here's the case study. Ta-da, finally. All right. At university where I previously was, there was what seemed to be, well, of course, at any university there is kind of the panacea of the week, okay? But this was really the biggie, okay? Because here in this remote little town in northwest Missouri, that was suffering a net population loss, net income loss. I mean, all of the socioeconomic indicators were just rather bleak. In comes the saving force, and of course that saving force was nano/biotech. Okay, in the form of Venturi Biosciences. In 2005, this whole thing lasts from 2005 to 2006, Venturi Biosciences actually did some negotiations with Northwest Missouri State University and said, we would like to work with you in developing a nano research center and biofarming test plot and genetic testing area in Maryville, Missouri, on your campus, to the tune of an infusion of over $20 million worth of capital, which then would be matched by bonds. And so this sounded really interesting. Now, from the get-go, what was fascinating about this is we had some issues about what it meant to publicly engage, okay? There was a general faculty meeting that was quite amazing. It was a study in one-sided communication, because basically we had the parade of the nano miracles. So we had, for example, these full-color, wonderful little mini films of bioluminescent products, that whole deal. And the sole emphasis was on two general types of nano applications. One, pharmaceuticals, okay? And of course, the medical implications, you can't get much more pro-social than that, all right? So it's a life-affirming innovation. The second thing that was emphasized was bioremediation, and we heard a few comments about that earlier today, okay? But that was it, okay? And all of it was just a look at what can be done. Okay? People are so enthusiastic about this, as a matter of fact, it created quite a stir on campus, as you might imagine. I mean, this little campus of 6,000 students, it's a teaching university, and this was seen as quite a coup. As a matter of fact, Venturi Biosciences was going to move its headquarters from California to Northwest Missouri. Okay? The university, without, I might add, going through complete curricular approval process, but that was corrected, okay, established in a matter of record time, particularly when you consider, how fast university bureaucracies move on curricular issues, they established whole degree programs in nanotechnology, okay, before any of these scientists showed up. And by the way, the scientists also were given, positions on the faculty automatically, okay. And so that basically is what happened. Well, the outcome of this is ultimately it was rejected. We'll examine the dynamics of that momentarily, but here's the punchline for you. If you're interested in what ultimately happened, the test plot for the biofarming and the research facility and everything, it's located within half an hour of where